that it's weird. You do TV for people that kind of do automotive TV, but they're not 100% car people. Why does it take you so long to get that car straight?
Yeah.
And that studio, it was the Power Block. It's now Power Nation. So it's how-to based.
Yeah.
So not every show, like the four-wheel drive show, Ian would take his stuff to the off-road parks and stuff. But like some of the muscle car shows and the trucks, if they filmed a commercial, because that's how they were paid ads, basically.
Right.
Hey, we're putting in this power window system. If they nailed it on the driver's side, that car may never get power windows in the other side because it was a prop car.
Yeah.
So we were one of the first shows out of the 5 that was going on there then that actually tearing it all down, new wiring, new everything, new this. And when I showed up, they said 2 weeks. I go, you guys are out of your mind.
Yeah.
And then they built my studio in the warehouse.
Really?
Miller Welders gives us 6 welders. Yeah. We've got 1 welder plug. Nobody thought this through. We're handing the welder back and forth.
Wow.
The air compressor could not keep up because all the studios had their own little compressors. Ours, we had a small compressor, but we'd bring in 12 guys every week and running all this air tools and
Hey, welcome to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP. I'm Jeff Smith. This is my car buddy Cam Benty and car builder Steve Strope, and we're going to tell you some stories.
So welcome to another episode of Car Guy Confessions with Jeff Smith, brought to you by our friends at arp-bolts.com. Great friends of ours who sponsor our show for us. We have a special guest star, Tim Sutton. Cam Sutton?
No, Tim Strange.
Tim Sutton.
Let's start again.
I did that. Tim, I'm sorry.
You
Tim
wouldn't
Strange.
want me and Tim Sutton on the same because you did. It'd just be the beat button. It would be like you'd have to censor with me and him together.
I don't know where that came from. Do
That's
not know
okay.
where that. I do know who this guy is. Cam Benty.
I'm equally strange.
Steve is traipsing around somewhere. We want to also thank our friends that help us out with this booth here we're at the Grand National Show. So we're in an undisclosed location, but at the Grand National Show.
Is that the Buick show?
No, I said Grand National Show. Did I?
Grand National Roadster show.
Did I say Buick? I did.
Would you like me to do the lead-in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please. Be
Please.
my guest.
Take over, Tim.
I am not a professional.
Take over, Tim.
She going to start this over again?
Stay in here. I can do it. You want me to do the lead-in?
Yeah,
Welcome
please.
to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP, where we're here with industry legends Cam Benty and Jeff Smith.
Ooh.
And of course, ARP, you can get all your bolts and hardware. It's just not where you can get your hair cut, it looks like this weekend. Yeah.
So
At least not the back part.
We should have him sitting in the center. We should have you sitting in. That was very good.
right.
That was very good.
That's it.
So my mom told me to stick with magazines. Don't go to TV and radio and things like that. So all right. So let's just dive right in here.
right.
So I read a little bit of stuff about because I honestly I do not know you very well. It's the first time we've ever met.
Obviously, the first time we met at the Street Machine Nationals meant nothing to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, we did.
Were there
When was
Buicks?
that?
Oh, I started going Street Machine Nationals. I was 14 years old.
Really?
St. Louis was my first year ever.
Okay. Okay.
there-
Oh
were
my
there
God.
Buicks
St.
there?
Louis.
Yep.
You were
I was
there.
14.
Oh my God.
You weren't
that was
14.
That was almost a disaster.
Yeah,
That
but
show-
that opened my eyes. I mean, that was the age of. I went to my first big show when I was 11 and still opening my eyes. And my uncle took me to big rod runs and custom shows and that. And that was the first big Street Machine show.
Okay.
And it's like, well, these people are crazy. It was Street Machine National Days.
It
man.
was.
It's nuts.
Was that
It
the one with
was
the
nuts.
dogs?
No, that was Indianapolis.
Oh, this is
Yeah,
where?
This was St. Louis.
Yeah, I never went to
East,
Indy.
East St. Louis.
Yeah,
East St.
I was
Louis.
14 that year.
Oh my
Lovely
God,
ride.
I'm surprised you survived because
Lovely neighborhood.
that was a. There was one way in and out of that place.
I was a kid, so
Everything was-
My dad always told me
Yeah.
to eat up because fat kids are harder to steal, so I was safe. I didn't fit in a trunk very well.
And that worked for you, didn't it?
Yes, yes.
I wanted to do something off of your deal here, just to give a little background here. National Rod and Custom Hall of Fame inductee,
And you're how
got-
old?
I am 51.
51.
You don't look that
Hot
old.
Rod Builder, TV show. Your TV show ran
Search
for,
and Restore on Spike TV for
there you go.
32 episodes.
Right. BMX race team owner.
Yeah.
Yep, we don't have our own kids, so we sponsor.
There you go.
We've kind of retired 35 riders, factory level BMX team, and me and my wife both still race.
Nice. Do you make them eat a lot?
Yeah.
Do you make them eat a lot?
No. Fat kids don't go fast on a bicycle.
There you go. Yeah, I was thinking a kid thing. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think when you and I first met. Was it like at RTM or something somewhere there? Must have been.
No, I think it was
with
way before that.
was with Zane Cullen maybe. Somehow I think Zane introduced us.
Wait, I'm not supposed. I don't want to admit on film or recording that I'm friends with Zane Cullen,
Okay.
but I think through Zane. You worked for
Was it Flowmaster?
Yeah, and I've been
Yes.
partnered with Flowmaster for about 25 years.
Yes,
so.
yes. I remember. You know what? That's probably where it really kind of locked in because we knew each other. But the fact of the matter is, at Flowmaster, I was in charge of the VP of marketing, so I was like running all that stuff, and that was great to work with you guys. Work with Zane, work with Troy, work with all those folks that were really top echelon builders because that was something that David Featherston had started before I got there because David was so immersed in it. His deal for marketing was, and he's passed now, I'm sorry to say, but the deal was to spend more money on you guys than a lot of the other kind of more traditional
more
advertising
traditional
because they would do more for you. And there were, I think he had a cast of at least 20, Bobby Alloway, all those guys that could do more and would do more because they felt not indebted, but because first of all, they liked
the product.
They loved the product. The product was already, sold itself. And here was a situation. So yeah, it was at Flowmaster that we really started to work together more often.
Like, That was one of my first. I've been running my hot rod shop about 30 years, and that was Flowmaster was probably one of my first marketing partners. Street Machine Nationals, DeCoin years. I built one of my first cars, and on Sundays it was an honor. Somebody invited you into their booth, and I remember it was maybe not the Flowmaster booth, but it was at least like the distributor that was there. I get to park with Rocky Robertson and all those guys. And. So yeah, it was pretty awesome and got to do it. And again, because I met David Featherston at the Street Machine Nationals probably when I was 19, and he started shooting all my cars, and he shot a lot of stuff for us, and then that's kind of how.
So you started building cars at 18, or probably earlier than that. 14?
Well, my dad was a hot rod guy, luckily.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit off camera here, but this is how you kind of got into this whole deal.
My uncle my dad took me to local rod runs. He built choppers till we were too big as a family to afford to ride on his chopper. So then he got a 57 Chevy, so I grew up around Tri-5s. I was about maybe 7, 8 years old. He got a 57 Chevy, so I was just, we're farm kids. We couldn't afford to do anything. So we had to do it all ourselves. I mean, I held a paint gun and painted a firewall on a 55 Chevy built when I was 8 years old.
8 years old?
Oh, yeah, I ran the hell out of it. I was like, oh, my God. It was bright yellow. I squeezed the trigger and didn't move. And it was a tilt front end car, so he'd always show everybody the run. He left it there. And he's like, that's where my son learned to paint. And they looked at the run and was like, well, I hope he got better, But yeah, I grew up in the shop with my dad. We painted farm trucks. And then
that's how you learn, by making the mistakes, right? That's how you learn.
As we said, my dad, I was building a car later. I think we said this before we started rolling, that his buddy says, how's he know how to do this? And he says, he's just not smart enough to know he's not supposed to. But that's what anything does.
You bet.
You
bet. But you were given the opportunity at that point. So
yeah,
that's
and
an
I started at a body
thing.
shop when I was 16, Corvette Place, and bought local collision shop that we did concours vets and bass boats and stuff. So I learned fiberglass before sheet metal.
We obviously had the eye for it, and you obviously read all of Jeff Smith's articles. So
I looked at the pictures anyway. And
don't bother reading.
But yeah, I mean, growing up in the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere, the magazine guys was where, I just bought Gary Height's Hot Rod magazine collection personally from him, 12 boxes I just got 2 weeks ago.
Really?
So I'm kind of a magazine nerd, and so is Zane Cullen, and we collect stuff back and forth. And in my shop, I'm actually building a actual library. Here they are, all in order.
Yeah.
Oh, my great uncle gave me all the Rod and Custom little pages.
That takes up a lot of space.
It does, yeah.
Well, you have just about every episode or every issue, don't you?
Hot Rod I have back to 64, and Carcraft I started reading it in 68. Okay. So that's where I started.
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking about going backwards, but between those two magazines, I mean, figure from 1964 to 2024 is, what is that? That's 60 years. We're not there yet, but pretty damn close. And it was a lot of weight to move when I moved, because I just recently got out. I escaped from California and moved back to Iowa.
Which I was originally from Illinois. I live in Tennessee now.
You live in Tennessee now? And so it's like I've moved back to my roots because my granddaughter lives there, and that's where I want to.
Oh, I've been in California for 6 days. I'm ready to go home. I've seen enough.
But so you're in Tennessee now. Do you do any media? You've got a podcast too, correct?
Well, I've been on a lot of guys' podcasts. We actually just bought our equipment.
Yeah.
And we're starting one. We don't even have the name. I'm going to record like 6 months worth of stuff and then put it out. But in 2 weeks, I'm recording I'm going to go towards a little bit more old school custom. Sure. My first interview will be Daryl Starbird.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I'm staying at his house, going to record him all by herself. So
that should be wonderful.
Yeah,
that should be terrific.
Yeah.
Nice. And how was the TV era? How was that?
It was fun. I don't regret doing it. That's what actually got us to move out of Illinois and move us down there. Really? I volunteered on Kevin Tate's Truck TV show first. Sure. and then just came down and did it. And then they were starting another show, and they flew me down for a screen test. And
nobody understands just how much work that really is.
Oh, yeah.
It's a burn down. It
yeah,
really
and
is.
it's weird. You do TV for people that kind of do automotive TV, but they're not 100% car people.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it take you so long to get that car straight?
Yeah.
And that studio, it was the Power Block. It's now Power Nation. So it's how-to based.
Yeah. Right.
So not every show, like the four-wheel drive show, Ian would take his stuff to the off-road parks and stuff. But like some of the muscle car shows and the trucks, if they filmed a commercial, because that's how they were paid ads, basically.
Right.
Hey, we're putting in this power window system. If they nailed it on the driver's side, that car may never get power windows in the other side because it was a prop car.
Yeah.
So we were one of the first shows out of the 5 that was going on there then that actually tearing it all down, new wiring, new everything, new this. And when I showed up, they said 2 weeks. I go, you guys are out of your mind.
Yeah.
And then they built my studio in the warehouse.
Really?
Miller Welders gives us 6 welders. Yeah. We've got one welder plug. Nobody thought this through. We're handing the welder back and forth.
Wow.
The air compressor could not keep up because all the studios had their own little compressors. Ours, we had a small compressor, but we'd bring in 12 guys every week and running all this air tools and
Was this the Joe St. Lawrence era?
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe St. Lawrence and Patty and great people.
They did a great job.
Yeah.
They really
They
did a
did.
super job. But they worked you pretty hard.
Yeah, we did them in 4 weeks, but it was 4 weeks.
We have to watch the Rossi rule, by the way. We have a Rossi rule.
Don't hit
Touch
that.
the table.
Okay. I talk with my hands.
That's okay.
That's all right.
Up in the air.
So did Paul.
Up in the air.
Yeah, I'll just sit here like Ricky Bobby. I don't know. I lost my train of thought there. But,
I'm sorry.
2 weeks on,
Yes.
2 weeks off, break, clean
Yeah.
the studio, stage the parts, come back in for 2 weeks.
Right.
So I'd come in for a day and a half, clean the studio, and go back to my shop and still build hot rods for people.
Sure.
So mine was like a quarterly special type of thing, but we filmed on and off, on and off.
I remember that. Yeah, because Joe was a friend of ours. I mean, we dealt with Joe I dealt with Joe quite a bit, and especially with Flowmaster, we used to buy all the content off of that as well. And that was a good time.
I have
and that was
a quick story. Summit wanted me to do tech tips for them. It was like a little tech tip. It was only a minute long, and so I came up with these ideas.
You only get a minute?
Yeah, it was a minute on camera.
Oh,
and which is an eternity. If because I
Not
told
for
him, I said,
you.
I will only, no, it was terrible. It was awful. They never invited me back, which was a good thing.
Okay.
Because the deal was, I said, I'll only do this if I don't have to memorize any line. Oh, no, you don't have to do any of that. Well, yeah. So I learned that the hardest tech tip to explain was the easiest to do because was on camera for like 3 seconds, intro, extro, or get out, and then the rest of it was all voiceover.
Yeah.
Because now I could just read it, but read it, with emphasis. Right. But then the easiest one was basically you just take clips and clip your fender cover over the fender with string clips. Well, he says, well, we have to fill a minute with this. And so I was on camera for like 30 seconds with this soliloquy that I had to memorize. And the poor camera guy was about ready to murder me. He was really good, though, because he kept saying, right before we go on, it was awful, and they never invited me back. Hey, we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP-bolts.com. We got a fantastic little backdrop here. They make an outstanding series of bolts, almost anything you would need for engines, chassis, things like that. In fact, we were at lunch today, and a guy asked you about the bolt on the back of your shirt, and and I said, well, it's really about a head bolt. They neck the stem down of the bolt on a short small block Chevy head bolt, so the clamp load is even across 3 different head bolt lengths on a small block Chevy. And, so that's the kind of technology that you get out of ARP. And we've all got stories on all that stuff.
For a translation of what he said, call ARPbolts.com.
but the message is that you can't get any better than that.
No, you cannot.
There you go.
Nope.
Excellent.
And then just check them out at arp-bolts.com. We'd like to thank our friends at InTheGarageMedia.com. They have 3 fantastic magazines. They've got Classic Truck Performance, they have Modern Rotting, and my favorite, All Chevy Performance with Nick, my buddy Nick,
you're
is
so
the editor.
biased.
So yes, of course.
Yes.
But they're doing print media, which is of course our favorite. So
Tangible
color and
magazine.
everything.
in color and everything, and you can get your car on the cover of one of those books, which is
Right.
a fun
that's a
deal.
lot.
Great
Yeah.
tech.
Great
written
tech.
by you and others
not always
that are
written by me, but
famous
yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Not always written by me.
That's right.
Just
So
pick it
check
up and
them out
read it.
at indegaragemedia.com, and they're our friends, and they will thank you.
See, we did that. You know, we always had to do little how-to stuff in there because you got to pay the ads somehow.
Yeah.
And I remember my show was like a quarterly special. So when I was filming, one of the other 4 shows would shut down. They would co-host with me, bring their camera guys and all that stuff. And I remember the one I went. I don't remember which show it was. I do, but I'm not going to say it out loud. Just piss people. Get mad at people or get them mad at me.
But worth bringing it on.
And
We're good at that.
he's like, hey, man, I want to, we have to talk about the emotions and what we're doing on the car. And I was like, hey, man, I'm in the middle of putting the motor in. We'll get this later into the day. And he come up to me again. He said, man, can I give you the notes of what we're going to talk about? And I'm like, oh, man, I'm busy. And finally, like third or fourth time, he was an old crabby guy. And he's like, I need you to write this down so you can go prep and research the answers. What in the hell you're talking about? Some of them guys were amazing mechanics, painters, body man. Some of them were just Ron Burgundy.
Yes.
They're just there. Hello, welcome to today, and whatever.
Tell me what to
but
say.
so it's like, okay, I says, let's roll. Give me the questions, and I'll stop right now. He goes, do you want to go through these? I go, roll film.
Yeah.
And he's like, so what are we doing today? And I'm like, hey, we're doing this, we're going this, and da-da-da-da-da. And it just rattled off, and he goes, you really know what you're doing. And I go, yeah, kind of. That's why I'm here. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. We're building stuff. Can I get back to work now? Yeah.
Well, that group of guys generally did know what they were doing. Who was the guy? Who's the guy that did the muscle car stuff? I can't remember his name. He's not there.
When I was there, Tommy Boschers and Rick Bacon were there.
Rick Bacon. That's
And
the
then
guy.
Steve Mank came, all talented fabricators. And then Rick Bacon was amazing painter, graphics guy. And then you
Yes.
had Ian Johnson. I went to the studio shortly after Jesse Combs left. So I never worked with Jesse, but her producer was my producer for my show.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it was Ian, and we called him Camo Chris. It was like a part-time guy. Ian was mostly by himself. And then
Right.
Mike Galley and John Bouchard were on the engine show. Kevin Tates and Ryan Shand were on the truck
Yeah.
show.
There you go.
Yeah,
I
everybody talented. Just the amount of talent in that room, and some of them
Was
guys
good.
are still there. Some of the guys have moved on. You
Yes.
know, Ian's doing 4-wheeler TV. Kevin does a lot of hands-on cars series, online
He does.
stuff, and a bunch of
He
stuff.
does a good
but-
job.
And we're all, and we still live on 20 minutes from each other.
Really?
Their studios are like they're close, and we'll go to dinner
studio was-
sometimes. And
that's
yeah,
great. Did you ever see the studio? Studio was impressive.
Oh, yeah.
Studio was
Oh,
very
yeah. Very,
impressive.
very nice.
Okay.
All the nice tools, great
Yes.
stuff. It's wonderful.
Nothing would
So I'm
advertise
friends
it.
with-
But it's a lot of work. So don't think, you just walk in for a couple hours, do a couple things, and go home. No, it's not like that at all.
You were talking about your summit thing. It's so funny because I transitioned over to do Sport Magazine for 7 years. I was at that magazine for 7 years on a whim. I filled a hole, another one of those deals. So they said, well, we need to do these advertisements for Jockey. So I said, okay, so I'll do the whole content stuff. And so I ended up doing all this research, and I wrote them. They were all audio, so it wasn't a situation that I had to memorize anything. And they weren't looking at me, thank God. But it was called the Jockey Sport Brief. And those ran everywhere. So I would read 20 seconds of like
did
a
you pick the
question.
models?
I should have.
Allegedly.
Jim Palmer. Remember Jim Palmer? That's reaching back. So I'd do 20 seconds of like a teaser question, and then there'd be this guy who had a professional voice, and he would say something about Jockey Sport Brief, and then I would pay it off at the end. And I did like 600 of those.
Wow.
I did so many of them. I mean, it was crazy. And yeah, I got to stay employed. That was about all I got. Yeah, so that was good. But anyway,
It was a cool place to work at. And now, like, the engine guys now are Pat Topolinsky and Frankie Foreman, and they're just like, Pat was part of Greg Anderson's Summit Pro Stock Car for years. Just amazing, which is cool. I'm very lucky. I'm friends with these guys. They live right outside of my town. So if I have a bad problem, they'll come to my shop and help me tune stuff. And they're like, there's a type of, you're struggling on something for a week, tuning a carburetor or whatever like that. And Pat will be like telling a joke and looking and hey, and it just like, there's like, yeah, I hate you. Yeah. Still.
Classically, he comes in, waves his
Yeah,
magic
they
wand
still
on
have
the
some
carburetor and
amazing
fixes
talent.
it,
But
yeah.
when he went there after being on Pro Stock, he's tired of traveling, so wanted to get off the road. And he goes, "I'm working at Disneyland. It's like you have
bet.
every tool possible
You bet.
that you want.
Yes.
crazy.
Yes.
It's great.
Do you know Chuck Hansen?
I know him, but he left before I came
Yes,
there. But
well before.
I knew him through his.
he worked
I
with
went to
us.
a couple of the Chevelle Nationals.
That was my first experience because I helped Chuck get into the magazine business at CarCraft, and we were actually neighbors. We would drive to work every day together, and many great times with he and his wife Lorraine, and then left, went to NHRA, was a sales guy for a while, and then calls me up one day and goes, "We're going to do." It was at that time it was Hot Rod TV, and then later transitioned to Horsepower TV. And then when I told him, because I actually went to visit him after I did that summit thing, right? And I went on there and I told him how horrible job I'd done, and he goes, yeah, you don't understand. It's like you're there for 12 or 14 hours. I'm sure this has happened to you many times. And then we get the car all put together to the point where we're going to wrap this up. It's 11:30 at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you got to be up. Yeah. And so I got a funny Chuck Hansen story real quick. So we're together, beginning of Power Tour. Must have been Nashville. I think it was Nashville. Maybe Memphis. I don't know. Doesn't matter. And we're walking around. He says, "Hey, you want to walk around for a little bit?" Yeah. So we get about 10 feet, and somebody comes up. "You're Chuck Hansen, you know." So, of course, he speaks to them for 10, 15 minutes. We walk another 10 feet, and somebody else recognizes him. And this goes on for like an hour, right? And finally, we get
walk the streets.
Yeah, and of course, nobody recognized me, which is exactly the way I want it. And because it's not important. And because Chuck's been on TV, right? So I said, "Chuck, I didn't realize that there were 2 Chuck Hansens." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, there's a Chuck that I know, the guy that hung out together and we babysitted each other's kids and did all that stuff and worked at the magazine. And then there's TV Chuck, right?" And he goes, "Well, you got to give them what they see on TV." I didn't realize this. This is, long before we did any of this stuff. That because if not, he says, because initially I didn't do that. And they would go, "Are you okay? You're not feeling well?"
Yeah.
I mean, because you're not like the animated guy I see on TV. You realize that's what you have to give them.
Yeah.
It's kind of like going to Wayne Newton's show.
I do a lot of race
here.
announcing too. I
Same here.
build hot rods, but then I
Yeah.
do race announcing. I do autocross for good guys and UMI, and I do some drag race stuff and everything. And at Des Moines, Iowa, I grew up just in Illinois, not there. So you go to the Good Guys show 4th of July weekend. A lot of my buddies come, or old hot rod guys I've known forever, but they haven't seen me for a little bit because I'm in Tennessee now. And they're like, "Oh, you must have been taking a break. We went over there, and it wasn't you on the microphone." And I was like, "I'm the only announcer here this weekend. We do have 2 announcers at some of the bigger events, but Des Moines, it's just me." And they're like, "No, it wasn't you, but there was somebody on the mic." And I'm like, "Well, you talk a little more exciting, and here he is coming out of the corner." And and then I'm not dropping the F-bomb every 30 seconds.
Right,
You got to censor yourself in front of the microphone. And
Sure.
Yeah. So they're like,
So you were at Good Guys this year?
Yeah,
Last year?
at Des Moines. At Des Moines, I was not. My niece got married, but I'm on the schedule. I signed my contract again. I'll be at 7 Good Guys
I was
events.
going to be there up until literally 2 weeks ago. My son's getting married that weekend in Colorado, so I won't be there. But
I've
but
been
that's my
there-
backyard now
yeah.
because I live maybe about an hour south.
I grew up just like 3.5 hours, just barely into Illinois.
Yeah.
So I'm
Maybe you
usually
can-
there. I've done Good Guys announcing for 8 years now.
Oh,
So
excellent.
Maybe you can announce the wedding.
I am ordained. My 2 nieces got married. I didn't do one that. I've done
2 for 1.
I am. Yeah, we actually pitched a TV show one time about. Maybe I shouldn't put this. I think it would work. About I'm building a car for somebody.
Yeah.
They're getting married. My wife is the wedding planner,
Nice.
and they're doing all this stuff. Then at the end, here's this car. I was like, "Can we do like a?" What do you saw? You can't share this or something like that. And
I do not disclose.
here's this car. It's almost like, "Sorry, ma'am, we've been lying to you.
Yeah.
And here's your husband's dream car. We've rebuilt it.
Okay.
If you're okay with that, I'm ordained." Kind of like move the bus, Right over here is the cake, your food, your caterer, your family. But we're going to do it right here, and you guys can leave in the hot rod. If you're mad because we've been pulling a little wool over your over, you can say no, not marry him, take the car. I don't know how many. You can only do like one season, but you really have to trust that woman. I mean, you should trust her if you're getting married anyway. But and then some of us that are announcers like Chad Reynolds.
Yes.
And another guy, we were going to pitch a TV show called The Preachers of Power. Yeah. So there's always ideas we're pitching. They fizzle out pretty quickly.
Lay your hands on the valve covers and feel the warmth of my
yeah,
sincerity.
yeah.
That's it. And divorce court follows it. So
Yeah, right. Yeah.
there you go.
So we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP and ARP-bolts.com. And we all 3 build cars. We all work on this stuff. And
I tinker.
You tinker.
I tinker.
Yes, we all build.
Yeah, and you know what? It's kind of a really cool multiple purpose fastener for me because there's all the science and all the technology, which is bottomless. Trust me. unbelievable amount of research that they put into these things.
Absolutely.
And on top of it, you get them out of the package, and they're absolutely beautiful, which I've joked before. It's like jewelry for your car. And
They're
when
pre-oiled.
we're building
Yep.
when we're building a high-end car, there isn't anything else going on it. It's part of the criteria for me to have them lining the engine bay, not just on the engine, everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
So you get all the strength, the durability, the reliability, and fantastic good looks.
Sure.
Kind of like Jeff here.
And without peer. Without peer.
With,
Anybody
and
else
you know
better?
what?
Or paired.
Without peer, there's nobody else
Correct.
that does
That
what they
is,
do.
it is. So check them out at arp-bolts.com, and they can help you out.
So tell us, we started to touch on it. So what are you building right now? And what do you like? What's like cool to you? I mean, we're at the Grand National Roadster Show again. What are you building right now? Let's start with that
I like everything.
first question.
I love Kustoms, the heart. I grew up with street machines and tri-5s, but if I could build lead sleds and chopping tops, I just love that. But I grew up going to that, like entertainers and stuff. It's like, oh, I shook the hand of Frank Sinatra. Well, I've shook the hand of George Barris, and of course, Gene Winfield's here this weekend, and he was misbehaving in the bar last night, and he does that. But he's 94 years old. Oh, it's crazy, yeah. And, it's just that, I shook the hand of Barry Lobeck and Boyd Coddington. It's like those were legends to me. I got cussed out by Gray Baskerville one time. I don't think I'm in a lone club on that.
Hit you with a flip flop.
At the Hot Rod Fest in Indianapolis Fairgrounds. I was there. Yeah.
Really? Wow. Gray's usually, at the show, it's afterwards it gets a little crazy.
Yeah. Well, I was getting a photo shoot
Okay.
with Cole Cornell.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And I didn't know where in the park we were supposed to go. So I said, I see Mr. Gray Baskerville.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Can you tell me where I'm? What the blankety blank should I know? I'm doing my own shoots. And it was like, that was my first interaction with Gray Baskerville. So.
Sponsored by Old Granddad.
Yeah.
He was probably having not a great day. So it was
but
probably really hot.
I interrupted his work, so I get it now.
okay.
That was like my very first photo shoot. It actually never made the magazine, but
That's okay.
but yeah. So I learned a little bit then.
So what are you building? What are you building?
I'm just finishing up a 59 Impala kind of Pro Tour thing. Got one off billet wheels.
Wow.
It's got a 509 cubic inch real 409 that the motor was built by Lamar Walden's son.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
all in aftermarket. It's 509.
He was Mr. 409.
Yes, it's got one off wheels. It's stock bodied, super slick paint, tight gaps.
Nice.
We got a 70 RT 426 Hemi aluminum headed electronic injection charger on the chassis table, putting an independent rear ender.
70 charger.
Yeah, RT charger.
Nice.
And we got a super rare Buick Skylark 54 in there, convertible.
Wow.
They made like 838 of them, and we are hot rodding it.
Is that the
have a
like
fake-
the
it's
World's
LS.
Fair? That was 53. Was that World's Fair car? Was
The 53 was a little bigger. 54 was a little bit. I'm a Motorama GM nerd.
Yeah.
And they designed that car for Cadillac. That's why it's got them lines on the back and it's got the
Yeah,
scooped wheel wells.
Yeah.
And Cadillac didn't want it. So they slapped the 54 nose on it, 54 dash on it of the
Okay.
Buick. And so the trim on the side is that normally, but and the back's a little bit different. The scooped wheel
Interesting.
wells and
Okay.
trying to find parts for them is like impossible.
No doubt. No
So
doubt.
I got that. I got a 62 O'Connell line in there for a guy that's kind of been a fill-in project for way too long. Over a military lady that I think she must be plucked someplace for her work, so I haven't heard from her in a while. We have a 70 442 W30 Cutlass sitting there with some bolt-on suspension stuff. Didn't modify the body too much.
Maybe she's chasing a Chinese balloon.
Yeah, I figure she doesn't really owe me any money, and it's sitting there, and it's like she's doing something for our country way more important than worry about her car. I support the military. And that car was like a W30. It was a special order seafoam green color.
Really?
And she wants it all black. So I have protected all, like it still had some slight chalk marks on the firewall and stuff. And when you take off the interior, it still had like the paper things from going down the
build sheets and stuff.
The build sheet was missing, but all the like the little
all the
we've completed this job. And during media blasting and everything, I've protected all of that. She plans to give it to her son, but someday her son sells it, somebody will tear into that and realize it was a seafoam green W30.
That's good.
So
So like the deal with your underwear where you get inspected by number 14.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I got a Chevelle that I built for me and my dad nights and weekends. It's sitting in there at 65. We took it to SEMA a year ago, and it was SEMA done.
Okay.
So I still have not even drove the car. It's ran, and the wheels have moved back and forth. And actually, Pat Topolinski helped me tune that and put the heads on. It's mini tub, big block, 1610s, Halibrands on it. It's got a 505 big block shoved back into the firewall, and the distributors cut into the cowl, and a bunch of stuff like Dad used to do. It's got Impala seats in it, the big Hearst shifter boot, and even so, like we're at SEMA, it was in the Royal Purple booth, and they're like, "Hey, you can take those plastic covers off the floor. You know, you're done cleaning it." And I'm like, no, this had the clear plastic. Remember them like $5.99? My dad, like, I don't know, did he run out of money? And everything that he had those cheap plastic. Found some on Amazon for $20 and put them in there. So there's all these little stories about the car. And my first car I built.
And that's a Midwest thing. I don't think that made it necessarily on the West Coast, but I remember that as a kid. Yeah. Very much a Midwest
And
thing.
my first car that I built, I drove a 64 SS 283 4-speed red on red car. It was my summer car.
Nice.
And you know, in the Midwest, you know, you're Iowa, you had a winter beater you bought from the front line at the junkyard and drove a 78 Polara or something I had one time. And that's what was the car I redid first, that 64 Chevelle. And I actually won runner-up best GM at the Street Machine Nationals and some runner-up
What
best.
year was that?
I was 19.
Wow.
It was 1990 or 91.
Go back
I was
31 years, yes.
I was the highest finishing skinny tire car that year. And like you guys are, what's that mean, skinny tire?
Right,
It was
right.
Pro Street was king,
Pro
and that
Street
was like
king
starting.
back then. Everything had giant tires in the back.
And I've since sold that car, so me and my dad wanted. I thought we'd build a Tri-5 together because my first car was a '55 Chevy actually, and my dad's got a bunch of Tri-5 stuff. He's like, no, let's build.
Is he still building? Is he still building cars?
Kinda. He's bought 2 more cars this year. He's got a 56 Nomad, and a 57 truck, and a 57 4-door wagon. And
I see a theme. Yeah.
he has a 56 Nomad still that I took to my wife to her junior and senior proms in. So wow. And so then we were talking. He said, let's build a first-gen Chevelle. So we're talking and looking for cars. Well, my buddy that I ran around with, went drag races with, and car shows growing up, and went Street Machine Nationals together. He had a 65. Well, he had since tore it down, family stuff, sitting in his barn.
Right.
Tornado beat the hell out of it, took the barn away, took the car, and I told him, I'm going to turn you into the Chevelle Abuse Association. I heckled him whenever I'd go home. Finally, he goes, you want that Chevelle? I go, yes. He goes, you and your dad going to build that car? Yes. So he sold me that car.
Wow.
And
Very nice.
it was weird. And then I was at PRI after we built that, and these local people from back home, they're drag racers now and comp dragsters and run a junkyard. They're like, did you buy that Matt Lindbaum Chevelle? And he's like, I go, yeah. And they go, we bought that. My grandparents bought that brand new.
Really?
It was just a 283 bench seat car.
Sure, yeah,
but that car's always been in a hot rod family.
Wow.
I love stories like that. So
that's
we
great.
built
That's great.
we built that together, and
How fun is that?
And those are great little cars. So, I mean, I'm a Chevelle guy.
then I have
of
another-
course I'm going to say that. But
every hot rod guy has other stuff that just is. I was working on this thing before I decided to finish the Chevelle. I lost my mom, so it's like, I need to get this Chevelle done with me and my dad. And, it's mini tubbed and all kinds of chassis mods and hammered on the ground. It's Scott Sullivan inspired kind of thing.
Yes.
And
Is there anything between you and your dad that you guys like don't agree on? Is there anything
he doesn't
he
like
likes?
big wheels. So
Doesn't
that's
like
why it's
big-
got 15s and 16s
Okay,
on
he's
it.
not big on
Interesting.
18s.
And he hates
yeah.
fuel injection because he's had a
Hates fuel.
tune port in his Nomad that's never ran right.
Really?
So he's actually taken that fuel injection off his Nomad right now.
Wow.
So my
A
weird
tune
like
port.
We can fix that for him. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. So bring it down, Dad. I'll put an LS in it.
That's it.
But then I got a
Some
weird.
Strombergs,
I'm a GM concept car Motorama nerd history buff. So I'm building like a what if. I've tried to sell this to a customer, and it's just too far out there for most people. What if Harley Earl and Bill Mitchell built one together?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So I've started with a 59 Impala hardtop. I'm going to chop it slightly. I was over in the custom building measuring the Exotica, the white 60 over there. It's chopped 1.25 inches, by the way. Yeah. The guy let me in the boot. Look at it. I have a note. This is the notes from the measurements of that car. I'm going to, yeah. I talked to
Block those out.
Gary Howard that chopped that. It was the last conversation with him before he passed away, legendary Hall of Famer. I don't know. Some custom guy. He chopped it till it looked right. So I ran it here.
Yeah.
And but it's a mix of a GM concept car back then. It would be like, here's the car. In 5 years, this roof might have been on a 58 Impala. This bumper might have been on a Corvair.
Right.
You could see that if you pay attention to the history. So this is like started with a 59 Impala hardtop. I've skinned the whole car. I just got a super rare. I didn't realize how rare they were because I did a 58 Bonneville for a guy and fell in love with the trunk. Like a Nomad has the lines on it back and forth.
Right.
The Bonneville has the lines that come down.
The chrome lines, aren't they?
No, they're stamped.
They're stamped? Okay.
And I can build that, but it's going to take me a couple weeks on all the metal shaping equipment. But if you can start with a trunk lid, I didn't realize between the convertibles and the hardtop, they only made 7,000 of those cars. I got a trunk lid last week. So I'm going to adapt that. line. I've got
Nice.
a different year GM hood that's going on it, and I'm sectioning, stretching, and widening 55 Chevy sheet metal.
Wow.
So think of it as a Tri-5 concept car.
As if it was longer stretched and stuff on.
I even wrote a story
chassis.
on my social media. I don't know, you guys are old. Do you have social media? And you know what that is? Can you get that on your flip phone?
Social distancing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wrote
In
a
fact,
story
I'm too
on.
close right now.
I wrote a.
Flip phones are now cool again.
I have 3
How about
people out here. I
that?
see, yeah.
How about that?
You know who has one? Mike Ring.
He does. That's who
does.
showed it to me yesterday.
That's it. There you go.
I said I wanted to do an email or something with him, and his wife's like, "Yeah, you have to send that to me."
Yeah.
And I was like, "It's okay. I already got your number." He didn't like that I had his wife's number already. But what were we saying? I lost my train of thought. Oh, I actually wrote a story and posted on April Fool's Day.
Okay.
And it was late in the day, so people were reading it the next day. And I was like, the whole thought process behind this car is, we've all heard the stories about the concept cars that were supposed to be cut in half, and some of them got put in the sheds and the storage trailers, and they came back out. So my story is, the guy that was part of the concept car, now you're going to have to follow me here. It gets deep.
Okay.
He was part of the concept car program. He actually was part of the crew that took him to the junkyard that day. He fell in love with this one.
Right.
He didn't take it to the junkyard.
Secreted away.
He took it home. He retired shortly after that from GM, become a Midwest cattle farmer, where my dad is, hid it in the cattle barn under hay, and years later his family found it in the old hay barn. So when I get it all mocked up, I'm going to take it and put it in the hay barn,
In the hay
and then
barn?
take pictures and Photoshop it. And then, so it came out and it got restored and all this. That's the whole thought process. So
and it sucks people in. I had a guy at the Street Machine, it's Summer Nationals up in Minneapolis, and he had done this. I forget now. It was a Mopar, 67 Charger, but it had some aero body modifications to it, and there was this long, drawn-out story, and he had all the right names to this story. Wow. I'm reading this thing, and I have a good friend of mine. My college roommate was an engineer at that time, or actually slightly later, but Ralph Youngdell was one of the guys he mentioned. So I called my buddy Don, and I said, "Is this true?" And I said, "I don't think it is. I think it's a fabricated story, but I got to check," right? Because I walked by the car, I could never find the guy, right, that owns the car. So I called my buddy, and he says, "Well, I don't know. Let me call Ralph." And I called him back about 5 minutes later. He goes, "Yeah, that guy's full of crap." It's a fabricated story.
And my buddy's going to Photoshop pictures and make them look vintage, and
There you go. Oh, yeah.
Photoshop
And
it in the design
feed-
studio.
feed the whole
and then
story,
if we
yeah.
show it here, it's actually I want to take it to Sacramento for one of the custom awards up there.
Nice.
And then at the end, right at the end of the story, it's like, well, that's all bullshit, but now you understand the theme of the car.
There
To
you
see
go.
if they get that
Yes.
far.
They get that
Yeah.
far.
That's
Right,
awesome.
right. No,
That's great.
I've smelled a lot of paint fumes and probably eaten a lot of paint chips as a kid.
Well,
so.
But you
I
know
just-
what? It worked for you.
I just did a story for Scott Sullivan. He built this 69 Firebird for a customer, and in the middle of this stuff, the red one, and if you follow his stuff on Facebook, he makes weird stuff up. Right? And he just posts it, and somebody always believes it. Well, he had all these stories. He would just throw in weird things. I collected them all, and he pitched it to John McGann. He says, "If Jeff writes it, would you buy it?" And so we're doing that story. It's a complete 100% fabrication, and only at in the beginning, I allude to the fact that this may not be true. I mean, you just may not be true. And at the end, we just come clean and say, none of this is true. None of it.
So
but
it's going to be like an April issue. Yeah. And we all love Scott Sullivan.
perfect.
And, and I met him, Street Machine Nationals. I was just some little grommet kid. When I was a teenager when I met him the first time, because he's way older than me. And so I was like, you were kind of a big influence to me, and he's pretty proud of himself. And he goes, "Yeah, I know, kid." And he's like, walks away kind of like, he kind of has that attitude like Don Perdome does. Hey, kid, everybody's a kid to you. And I stopped by this summer on the way to, I didn't go to Des Moines, good guys, because my niece got married. So I drove to Columbus the next weekend. Okay. And I stopped at BBT shop in Illinois, and I was like, "Hey, Scott, can I stop by the shop?" "Yeah, man, come on by." Yeah. And Bob from ARP was there that weekend.
Okay, Bob's there,
So we come there, and he's like, and I knew that he was behind the house and the house he grew up in. He's never grown up because he still lives in his mom's house. That's what I told him.
And with a 2-car garage.
I don't know how he gets the low cars in that driveway.
Oh, man. I mean, the cars that have come out of that little tiny garage is just unbelievable. And you think he's got this huge shop and, you know, all the tools you saw on the TV show, right? All these, and you go out there and there's a Rubbermaid thing full of tools.
Yeah, and
and a chop saw and a welder.
Yeah.
And it's like, where's the rest of the stuff? He goes, what the rest of this is it? You know, like just, it's amazing.
So I stopped and hung out with him that day, and I posted on my way to Columbus for the Good Guys show. I posted, hey man, I got Scott Sullivan. Bob was here, took a selfie, you know, like teenage girls. So somebody's seen that, and they come up to me and says, tell me about Scott's shop. How is it really a 2-stall garage? And I go, no, he's lies. He says he has CNCs, chassis tables, scanners, 30 employees. And the guy goes, I knew it. I knew it. I told Scott that when he got to Columbus. He goes, you son of a bitch. But, I don't even think it's a 2.5 stall garage.
If it's 2.5,
Yeah.
it's barely that.
I mean,
when we did Cheese Whiz, that was the first time I'd really spent. I knew who he was. We met at the shows, but I never spent any time with him. And I realized on the flight out to do the drive, I thought, this guy could be a closet axe murderer. I don't know. I mean, you know, I've met him at the show.
On that, I think.
You mean like getting in this room?
And it was like, but we had such a good time.
Yeah.
But and I've had several people tell me that, you know, it's a little egotistical, and it's like, well, but you have to get past that.
Oh, he's a great guy.
He's a
great.
super
and
guy.
growing up as a
very
kid, you know,
dry humor.
I'm not a
Very
sports guy,
dry
but I
humor.
think there's some basketball player. He has a shoe line. What's his name?
Jordan.
Jordan, Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
But these guys growing up to me, reading the magazines, thanks to you guys, was just, they were my Michael Jordan.
Sure.
I mean, I had posters on the wall
Same for us.
of Matt and Debbie Hay, and now
you
I
bet.
go to Phoenix, I go to his place and see his amazing collection of IndyCar parts and have lunch with him. And Rocky Robertson lives 15 minutes from my niece in Illinois, so I stay away from family stuff, go see Rocky.
Yeah, you bet.
And, you know,
When
friends
he's
with-
not on his boat with his girlfriend.
Yeah, you have to make sure. It was sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, I need to see Matt Hayes stuff. The IndyCar stuff sounds unbelievable.
it's absolutely amazing.
Did,
the
did
stuff
you
he's
hear
got.
the story about? See, we should save this for. I'm
Okay.
trying to get him on
Let's
the
get
show.
him on the show. Let's get him on the show.
but
Make sure he brings
built-
his 3-foot-long tube socks with him. Yeah.
Does he
that
hide
we
in-
all wore back
does he,
then.
does he hide in those?
But he actually found the turbine car, Indy car that Carroll Shelby did.
Was one that
It was-
Andretti drove, right?
No, it was Andretti, but I forget who drove it. But it was, and there's a great story behind it because it was a total cheater car. Because by that time, this was 2 years after Granatelli had introduced it, said restricted the inlet.
I see.
And he told me this great story where Shelby built an iris, so they would test it, and then on the track it would open up. And
Did
they
any of
would
them
go that
turbine
fast.
cars? I know. I think they got the pole one year. I don't think any of the turbine cars actually finished the Indy 500.
No, they didn't. They would always break right at the very end. It was crushing. You know, and
I'm an Indy
Granatelli-
fan too. I haven't missed
Yeah.
a 500 in
Yeah.
30 some years, so I go every year to the
3 laps.
500.
Within like 3 laps.
Yeah.
They lost
Oh,
a,
yeah.
They lost a bearing.
Lost
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Not
yeah.
not in the engine. In like
in
a wheel
the
bearing.
drivetrain. Yeah.
They lost a wheel bearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things. I'm
Just
of
amazing.
course I wasn't born yet back then, but they do the vintage things before other IndyCar races. We go to Nashville
Yeah.
and they do like. Well, Al Unser Jr. I've got to be friends with Al Jr. because
Really?
Speedway
Yeah.
has him come and run autocross.
And run-
so I've
yeah,
got to be
right,
friends.
right, with
You
the
he's
autocross
standing there.
cars.
He's like, "Hey, Tim and Kerry," and come over and hang out. But they do the vintage stuff like the parade laps before the Indy cars run. And I don't know if it was Indy last year or Nashville. They ran one of them turbine cars.
Really.
And it's the
Wow.
sound. It's like,
Oh,
oh
yeah.
my goodness, it's so awesome.
they're
I mean, they're not going fast, but they're
Yeah.
going
No,
30,
I get
40
it.
mile an
It's
hour
still,
around.
still pretty cool.
Yeah.
Those are nuts.
Yeah. So we definitely need to get
Yeah, we'll get
Matt
Matt
and
on
Debbie
here.
on the show.
We'll get Matt
Yeah.
on here. So anything you see at the show that you particularly liked? I mean, obviously there's so
Yes.
much to suck in here. Yeah, I mean,
Probably
just in
quite a bit,
general.
yeah.
right?
It's, I mean,
it's-
Troy's got a
It's
awesome piece.
amazing the stuff that's here, and I think it's a strong year for every major award. The AMBR cars, there's not one clear winner out there. I mean, you got everything here. I love going to the lowrider building. Just the paintwork over there is just mind blowing. And I came 3 years ago. I came right before the Crazy World stuff, and then they didn't do a year. So it's been 3 years, I guess, since I've been here.
Yeah.
And I was like, skim through on setup day, and I was like, oh crap, there's 2 buildings I didn't go in yet. I kind of always forget how many buildings are here.
Yeah.
And then of course
Yeah.
today we're here Saturday, and there's like probably 1,200 cars drove in today.
Easily.
And they're like,
Easily.
hey, you want to do like a drive-in pick? So now I got to go do. I was like, I don't know if I want to work that hard. And look, I just kind of want to enjoy the show.
Make your head hurt. You know?
And like,
So-
I don't even know. I got probably a top 3 in the Roadster side and a couple 2 to 3 in the Sloniker side. And I don't know. It's just crazy. But yeah, the Sloniker, I like the custom that's over there. He kind of built it to go to Sacramento in a few weeks to go for America's Most Beautiful Custom. I think he's probably got a good shot there. And then, of course, the Andy Leach car. My buddy Randy from the paint house painted that car. That car is incredible. That car, so I've known Andy since he was probably 18 years old. And I was like, that thing in 20 years is still going to be cool. It's not like, oh, you built that in 1991 because it's got heartbeat graphics on it.
Right.
And it's an elegant, classy car that I could see it like in a museum someday. And the light up, did you see the light up?
I did.
The
Awesome.
logos in the seat
Yes.
backs and
Crazy.
just it's full
I mean,
of
the
details.
attention to detail is just beyond.
And then
You
over
need to
here
go take a look.
on
It's
the
really-
Roadsters, the car that Rad Rides finished for Charlie Chad. I grew up by Charlie Chad.
Oh, did
he
you?
had
Yeah.
there was always a car. Earl Nelson was like famous to me, local guy. Hit a couple magazines when I was a little kid. Had an orange Gasser Pro Street Willys.
Okay.
Then he lowered it in the lowering Pro Street days and painted it Fruhoff yellow, and it was in Popular Hot Rodding then.
Okay.
And I think it was in Popular Hot Rodding when it was orange. Well, I found out just a couple of years ago that car was candy red with a chrome firewall when it was built to be a Gasser.
Really?
That was Charlie and Sandy Chads that have a car competing out here that Rad Rides finished. So that guy's been a local old school hot rod dude for years.
That's
And just ornery as hell. And then there's the greening car that they built for John Hall is absolutely incredible. Greenings have all them CNCs and all them little hidden details. And I walked by it again, waiting to meet you, and it's like I seen 12 more things I didn't see.
Yeah.
I was in their shop right after 2 days after I got back from the SEMA show, the end of November. They had not started the body work on that car.
Wow.
It was still bare metal. They were building and machining, and George, the machinist, was there machining parts and everything, and the grill was off, but there was no. They said they didn't put epoxy on it and start body working that till like December 2nd. I mean, it's not a fender car; it's a little car, but still the fit and finish and all the body mods and stuff like that. And I don't even know if the doors were flush fit yet when I was there then that day. I mean, probably were, but I was like, I got to get out of here before I get put to work. So I'm kind of over that thrash. And then I really like the Jack Chisenhall car too. That a lot of awesome people were involved. Daryl Hellenbeck painted it, and Brizio assembled it, and they got the machine firewall. And Jackie Howerton did some of the torsion bar suspension underneath of it. And that car is just really incredible.
Wow.
I mean, of course, it would look good sitting next to Jack Studebaker.
Yeah.
Last year I sat in Jack Studebaker. I was there on a tour, and
200-mile-an-hour air-conditioned car.
yeah, it's when I realized my dad was right. Eat up, because fat kids not only they're harder to steal, they're hard to fit in a Bonneville Studebaker. And I love Bonneville too. We went. My wife even wants to do Bonneville. And we have some friends that they both do nitro cars in Bonneville. Brian and Ron Hope. Wow. I don't know if you know the Hopes.
No.
Ron is third generation. He runs the Rat Trap Racing nitro car.
Okay.
Well, Brian now drives Rich Galsco's Pure Hell car.
Okay.
So they live 20 minutes from us. Well, they also got Bonneville cars, and in their family, in different cars, the dad, Braun, the grandpa, has a 262 record. Brian, my age, has a 223 record, and their daughter had a 219 record. Wow. So we're getting ready to do an aero package and they changed the motor and changed from a Pro Charger to twin turbos.
And what class car? What is it?
The alphabet classes.
Yes.
They're LS turbo. Their cars look like a comp dragster, but they're modified roadster because they're Model A bodies.
Okay.
But they kind of got a comp dragster
modified
nose.
roadster, right.
And one of them's the dad's car's front engine, and then he sits in the body of the car. And Brian's car, he sits in the body, and the motor's behind them.
Okay.
So that's what those are. And they have some door slammer cars too. They don't always run, but in a few years, they just with the turbo motor in. He wants to bump up his 223 record, and then his boy's going to run. In the future, I might be able to at least do licensing runs and get on the short
that'd be
course.
cool.
So that would be a bucket list.
That would
It was
be
like
awesome.
we fell in love with Bonneville, and it was like, I really want to do this. We were going to build a truck. We were going to build an OBS truck, long bed, crew cab, aero pad. We had all this stuff and figured out, well, it's going to be way cheaper if I do some body fairing stuff and some paint work and maybe get some seat time instead of building a car for yourself. It's going to take you 15 years to build a Bonneville car. But that's
because your car comes last.
yeah. And, I've been lucky to do all kinds of stuff in this industry and TV, and stood on the announced NHRA. I've stood on the starting line with 2 nitro cars taken off.
Yeah.
I've been infield at NASCAR races and in the pits and buddies. But Bonneville is like nothing you can possibly imagine.
It's like racing on the moon.
You go and here's George Poteet's $1 Million Crew. They're changing motors in 2.5 hours and getting back out there and going almost 500 mile an hour. And then there's a dude that looked like he hasn't showered in 3 years in a U-Haul van that he's sleeping in it down on the corner and running some motorcycle. Yeah. And it's like nothing.
Yep.
You just have to. Even if you're not a car person, you got to go to Bonneville.
Yeah.
If you're not a horse person, you got to go to the Kentucky Derby. If you're not a car person, you got to go to the Indy 500. There's just things you need to do in this on this planet, and you just have to see Bonneville with cars or motorcycle going down that.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
And it's just the whole vibe of the place.
Yeah, you bet.
Because
I mean, I got goose in my hair standing up just thinking
true
about it now.
enthusiast. Yeah, you
It
know.
happens when you're around Jeff. And on that note, you know what time it is?
It's time for
Wrapping up.
wrapping up.
That's it.
Didn't we just
we've
get-
exceeded our time limit already again.
I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago. We talked 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whoa.
About nothing.
Yeah. Well,
That's what we just did.
This
We just-
always
we
goes
just put
so
them-
fast, and at
Exactly.
the end, we was like, we could talk for another hour. So
Yes.
we might have to have you back on again
Absolutely.
because
Well, I
this has been a lot
appreciate
of
it.
fun.
I work by my shop, by myself in the hot rod shop, so I put podcast on. So you guys have both been in the shop, and you guys ain't worth a shit in the shop. It's like they got to come. And, hey, hand me this wrench. Oh, they're not really here. So yeah, I enjoyed podcasts. And,
Happens a lot.
Well, we
it's
have
an
a
honor,
good
so.
time with it, and
Absolutely.
thank you so much for coming out and seeing us and spending some
So-
time with us.
This used to be Strope's seat.
Yes,
I'm in Steve Strope's
you're
seat.
Steven. You're yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
I caught him the other day.
Yeah,
Set up,
yeah.
sitting there.
You might replace him.
And I give him a hard time. I caught him going with his hair. And now
Oh, yeah.
everybody's
He does that.
giving him a hard time because now Bob's growing his hair out. So
Oh, he
it's
is?
like,
Oh, okay.
You haven't seen Bob from ARP yet?
No, I haven't
No,
run
I
across
haven't.
him
I have
since
not
I've
seen
been
him.
out here.
Yeah.
I
So
did put struts in the seat for you.
because we like to abuse Steve. It's great sport.
And me and Steve get along great because we're old BMX guys. We collect BMX parts.
Yeah.
So we always
Yes.
talk about BMX stuff.
Okay.
We hardly ever.
Okay.
He'll call me,
magazines.
hey, I just went to this bicycle swap meet and I bought this. And that's the
magazines.
cool thing
Have
about
you been
it.
to his
And
place to see his
I have
magazines?
not, but I've heard.
Well,
that.
I have. In fact, I was going to tell him this. I was going to save it till he's here, but I'll go ahead and use it. It's like I'm staying at his house. I've been here for like a week because we did NPMC, then it was a week in between the shows, so I was hanging out. He let me stay at his house, and he's gone. He's out here, working the show and everything. I've been reading, Rodder's Journal, right? Because I don't have a lot of those
Better
things.
put them back in order.
I know. And I just the show we did together the other night. It's like I read the whole book that he had on I just brain faded. Ken Miles, thank you very much because I'm old. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah,
He put tabs on the ones that have pictures of him in there, right?
I have a book collection too of automotive books and stuff like that, and I kind of paused on it. I haven't got all the way through the Don Perdome book, but Elena did an amazing job on that. But I
She's
I
awesome.
like her writing style. I give her compliments, and sometimes she's like she kind of doesn't remember who I am, and it's like, who is this creeper guy? I was following around at SEMA and talking to her. It's like, hey, you read
right after I got on Facebook, I said, I told her I was like, on Facebook, basically so I can keep track of my kids. And she goes, you never post anything. I said, no, I don't do that. She says, you're a lurker.
See, sometimes I think I'm like,
that sounds really bad.
see, I'm such a super fan of writers, and I'm truly honored sitting next to you guys that you helped me learn a lot of stuff and reading the magazines and stuff. And sometimes I think I'm like Chris Farley. Hey, remember that time you sang that song? Wasn't that cool? Remember that time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You was talking about it a
You do
lot.
that very well, by the way.
She did.
You do that
She
very
did.
well.
She did. Bolts. We need to wrap her
Okay,
up here.
all right. So again, we've had a great time. Thanks so much for showing up here and helping us out. And we want to thank our friends at arp-bolts.com and also Kevin and the guys and John Buck. John Beck. Oh man,
There'll be a test
anyway,
later.
please excuse me, but giving us this place here, making it work for us, and I hope you guys will stay with us and keep watching, and we'll just keep telling you stories.